Here are some additional instructions for the G-Lab. If you could open up Notability and scroll to this page in your lab, which is Analysis Part 1, and we're going to be focusing on how to fill in this little data table in the middle. You're going to need to have your graphs already completed, so make sure your graphs are completed before you start to fill in this analysis, or it's going to make it a lot more difficult. So if you haven't done your graphs yet, you need to pause this video and go ahead and go do your graphs first, and then come on back and take a look at this section. So what you're going to do, essentially, is you are going to compare the slope on your position time graph to the data in your data table on the lab. So the first thing I want you to do is take a look at your graph. And when you're looking at your graph, you should have highlighted two sections. So you should have highlighted, 2 points at the beginning and put in a best fit line, and you should have highlighted 2 points further out along in the curve of your graph here and put in a best fit line. And if you told it linear, you should have gotten these two boxes that pop up. And as you know, when you're looking at the equation, y is equal to mx plus b, m is your slope. So those are your two slopes. You are going to go ahead and enter those numbers onto this graph right here. So the first point goes in this box and the second point goes in that box, corresponding to whatever times you selected. Now in my example here, I selected 0 and 0.1 for my first section, and I selected 0.5 and 0.6 for my second selection. Your numbers might be different, so make sure that you have it corresponding to the graph that you put together. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to go ahead and take a look back at your data table, and we are just now going to be looking at times and velocity. And if you notice on your data table, your velocities line up with the times that are in between the 0.1, 0.2, 0.3. They line up with those in-between numbers. So when you go back to your data table, down here in the analysis part, you should be looking at the midpoint number that corresponds to the two that you picked there. So since I picked 0 and 0.1, my midpoint number is 0.05, and I'm going to go back to my data table and pick the corresponding velocity that matches with 0.05. I will do the same thing for the corresponding velocity that goes with the time of 0.55, because those are the numbers that I chose. Additionally, there are some instructions that you no longer need because we are having you do 3 separate graphs. You're doing an XT, a VT, and an AT graph. So you no longer need the instructions that I have crossed out here, because that is some instructions that show you how to switch if all of your data was on one graph. So basically for the second part of the analysis, we are looking for the slope of the velocity graph and the average value of the object's acceleration. For the acceleration part, you could use the data table, or you can look at the best fit line data on your graph. Either way is just fine. Hopefully that helps you out a little bit with your lab, and make sure you go to your teacher with questions if you still have any that remain.